In this demo video, we'll be examining practical ways that we can use Ikena Spotlight to redact, obscure, and spotlight different persons or objects of interest. We go ahead and open up Spotlight, and we're going to use this video as our example. We're going to focus on a few things in this video that we want to maybe highlight or redact or spotlight. In this example, there's a lot of different things that we can do depending on what's most important. For instance, we could highlight the object that's in this individual's hand, which appears to be a knife. So we could start here. We can go and we can select two different types of objects that we want to use to highlight or obscure or redact something within the video. So in this case, we're going to start with an ellipse, and we're going to draw the ellipse around the individual's hand. By default, we've selected to redact that, but we actually want to do the opposite. We want to highlight that object or draw a border. Now we have a couple of different things that we could do. We could select no change, in which we actually do nothing within the ellipse. We can select a block type of redaction, which puts blocks. We can actually put a blur. We can put a solid color, or we can simply draw a circle, and that's what we're going to do in this example here. We can control the thickness of that circle. We can also change the color of this circle. So in this case, I'm going to select red. We can also add other things to this circle, like an arrow, and we can change the width of this arrow and the height of the arrow. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, a little bit skinnier, and we can change the alignment of this arrow. So in this case, I'm going to put it to the side. We can also change the color of this arrow, and we can have it match the color of the circle. We can also add text or a caption to this object. We can go ahead and we know that it's, in this case, it's a knife, so we're going to type in knife. Now knife gets added, and we can adjust where that gets written. We'll put select the bottom portion, and then we can also, again, we can adjust the color. It's a little bit too dark. We'll go with the red. We have a shadow color here. We'll keep it at that. And then we can also control the font type and size. We're going to make this font just a tiny bit smaller. Go to 12. Actually, we'll make it a little bit larger for this example. So now we've got the basic framework of this particular object that we want to highlight. And now we're going to step through the video a little bit. And you notice we've got our accurate tracking turned on. And we're going to play through this video a little bit. And now you notice that the object does not follow the knife. That's because we only have the first keyframe selected. So we're going to go back to right about here, where the knife kind of disappears, and we're going to add a keyframe to our video, and you'll see that keyframe is designated by a dot here. Now we could have also have gone over here and selected our add keyframe dot here next to our object, and you can see we can actually name our object as well. So we're going to call this knife. And that way we can keep track of this layer. We refer to these different objects within the tool here as layers, where we can add different multiple layers to this video. Now you can see we have a keyframe. We can actually jump back and forth between keyframes. So we can go back to the beginning of this keyframe and let it play, and you can see it does a pretty decent job of following. But you'll notice that the keyframe at a certain point, the knife actually goes outside. So what we can do is we can actually increase the size of our object. And now we can go back to our previous keyframe. And you'll notice that between this keyframe and this keyframe, our object actually grew. You can see how it starts out as a smaller circle, and then it actually grows and then gets smaller again, going back to the second keyframe that we added initially. So do some different things. What I might do is actually just go back to our original keyframe and just make this circle a bit larger to begin with, something like this, and then go back to this keyframe and again make the overall object larger. And so now when we go back a couple of keyframes, we'll make this one a little bit larger as well. We'll go back and we'll hit play and see we're following that. Now what we can do here is where the knife goes behind the individual's back, right about here. So we can, right there, we can add another keyframe. And then over here in our keyframe properties, we can select visibility and turn it off. So now that object, that layer disappears. So we can go back a couple of keyframes. And now that disappears. Now you can see her hand's going to swing back out again. So here in a second, go next frame. Right about there, we'll add another keyframe for this object, just to draw attention that the knife is now visible again. And again, we don't have another keyframe after this, so go right about here. We'll add another keyframe, and again, we're going to expand this a little bit. She begins to go out of frame. We'll go back to our previous keyframe. And you can see it kind of jumps around a little bit, so we're just going to manually adjust this. Add a keyframe here. You notice it already adds. We'll go back to the previous keyframe. And you can see it jumps around a little bit again, so we'll go back to where it jumps around. Go back to our previous keyframe. We'll just tweak this as necessary. I'll advance this here. And then we'll add another keyframe here as the knife begins to go off. We'll draw another keyframe here, and then we'll select this to disappear again. So we'll go back to our original keyframe, and we'll just track this object now. Disappears, comes back out again, and goes off frame. So that's one type of practical thing that we can add to this video. Now, perhaps in this example, we also wanted to redact the individual's face for a number of reasons. Maybe they're actually a victim. In this case, they're not. They're actually the person holding a knife, but we'll just say that we need to redact this person's face. So again, we can go back up to our ellipse. We're going to draw an ellipse around the individual's face. In this case, we can go back to our area type and we can do a soft blur around the individual's face. And again, you'll notice we only have one keyframe here. So it's not going to track her face because it doesn't have another keyframe added in for reference yet. So we'll let it play for a little bit. And right about here, we'll add another keyframe. We'll adjust our object. We'll expand it since she's now stepped in a little bit closer. We'll go back to our previous keyframe. We'll just watch how this plays out. You can see it begins to grow a little bit. What we're actually going to do, we're going to help it out a little bit, shift this down, expand our object, and go back to our previous keyframe. Let's see how that plays out. Again, now, since we don't have another keyframe after this, we're going to let it play a little bit longer. And then we'll add another keyframe in here. We'll expand our object. Now remember, this object will automatically expand proportionally in between keyframes. So we don't have to worry about incrementally making it larger. We can go back to our previous keyframe by clicking on that keyframe dot in our layers section. See, that does a pretty good job, and there it jumps off, so we want to bring that back down, help the tracking algorithm out a little bit. And you can see now we don't have another keyframe, and her face is going to begin to go off in the frame here. go ahead and make this a little bit larger. We'll go back to this previous keyframe. Then we'll wait. You can see her head goes all the way off. We'll go back to the previous keyframe. And I think we need to adjust just a hair. So now we can go back to the beginning and watch as this tracks and redacts the subject's face. And we can also go back now that we've got kind of a basic idea of where we want our redaction to take place. We can kind of fine tune it. We can adjust the size of the object as it goes along and add additional keyframes as we see necessary or if they're required. You know, maybe we want to cover a little bit more of the back of this individual's head here as they walk along, so we can make little minor tweaks. But what we're not having to do is add a keyframe for every single frame of the video. We can selectively add keyframes to assist the tracking algorithm in following part of the video, whether it's a face or a knife or an object. Now, something else that we can do is we can actually flip this around and reverse it. So rather than redacting this person's face, we maybe want to draw attention to this person's face. And so we could actually go back and select no change. And then in our background layer, which you notice our background layer is always on the bottom, we can add a keyframe here. And you can see what this background layer does. We can adjust some of the properties with this background layer. We can we can darken it. We can do a block sort of redaction like we can do with the face, or a blur like we were previously doing with the face. So with this example here, I'm actually going to kind of blur the background. Now you'll notice here that we're still highlighting both the knife and this person's face. So we could actually maybe even expand on this. In this case, we could maybe take this object and we could maybe highlight the entire person, which is what we're going to do here. So again, we're kind of doing the opposite of what we previously did. So before we were attempting to redact a person's identity, but now we're actually going to try and follow this person as they move through the scene and basically redact everything else that's going on. And we might do this for a number of different reasons, maybe just to focus our attention on this person's movements within the video, maybe to obscure other types of private information that might be in the background of this video. And this might be the easiest way to do it. So now we can go to all of our previous keyframes and we can resize accordingly. Select the next keyframe, just adjust the size of this keyframe object again. And again, we're not having to select every single frame of video, we're just selectively going through the video at certain portions where we've already added keyframes for our spotlighted objects. In this case, it was originally the suspect or the individual's face. I'll just do this for a couple more keyframes. And you can see here we actually have two keyframes, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit on our timeline so I can see where those keyframes are at because they're pretty close together. So I'm going to select the first keyframe. And select the second keyframe. Make this grow just a little bit more. And then we'll zoom back out of here. Go to our last couple of keyframes. Just resize this object to cover this person. And actually, we really don't need to resize this much because we're just just covering or showing person's face. Just expand. That should be good. So now we'll go back to the beginning. And so now we're kind of doing the opposite of what we were doing previously. And again, we can go in and add additional keyframes to kind of help our tracking algorithm as it tracks this person's movements. If we want to pop that up. And again, we can add additional keyframes to kind of assist the tracking algorithm. We could add an additional keyframe here. And again, we're going to expand this object a little bit more. So just another type of example. And again, the more time we spend on this, the more keyframes that we add. The smoother the tracking will be. But we can, with just a few minutes of effort, we can go from redacting this person's face to highlighting this person's movements and also highlighting the object that's in the person's hand. So we're going to go back to the beginning. Now, something else that we can do is we can add different types of annotations or text to the video. So in this case, we can add perhaps just a generic title or some text or caption to this video. We can already add captions for specific objects. In this case, we can add a caption for the knife. We could also have added a caption for the person here, and you can see we can go in and we can name these objects. I'm going to name this person. In this case, we'll just leave this as text. And here we can click on this object again and we can add a caption. We can say person walking. And that gets displayed. And again, we can adjust all of the properties for the text in terms of color, font size, and style, like we did with the knife. Again, we can also do the same thing with the person. We can select the person object again, and we can add a caption. We could say suspect, and we can maybe put that to the right. Again, this will follow the suspect as they walk along. So different types of annotations. The first types of annotations that we did actually stick with the object as they move along through the scene, and they stay locked on, and we can actually select other types of annotations that stay fixed to certain portions of the video. We can also add other things like video time in real time, so this gives us a type of counter. I'll just give you an illustration of this. So in this case, this video starts at 0 at the point that the video starts and goes forward in time. So we actually get a time, from the portion where the video starts, starting at 0 and then going to the end of the video. In this case, it would go to 42 seconds. We go ahead and delete that. We can delete the layer by clicking this X here. We can also add a real-time type of video annotation, and here we can actually select a specific time. So if we wanted to line up our times with the time that's in the video, perhaps we have a video where we don't have a time that's burned onto the screen, and so we want to add that for reference. We can go ahead and add a specific time to the video to kind of give additional context to what's going on in the video, especially if it was a longer video or maybe something was going on over the course of several minutes or possibly even several hours. We could add in that real-time display to give better context of what time of day the action was occurring or taking place. And we can adjust that. We can adjust all the properties for this time display in terms of the size, color, etc., etc. And then we can also go in and adjust the date and start time for this display here. Something else that we can do is we can control, in this case, as this person walks forward, because this object is in the above these other layers, it's going to take precedence. So what we'll do here is we'll actually flip this around. We're going to take the background, we'll go to our background layer, we're going to select a keyframe, and we're just going to turn the visibility off. We're going to go back to our person, and we're going to blur this individual. Now you notice, because the person is above the knife, we're actually blurring the knife, but we don't want to do that. So I'm going to flip the knife and put the knife above the person. So now we can still see the knife. We've got our person walking text that we want to always be on top. And then we've got this other video time, we'll just call this video time layer here, that shows up later in the video. So we'll actually skip to that portion of the video. And so you see we want this to stay on top as well. So as the person passes through, this time actually stays on top. Now if we flip this around, put this on bottom, now that time gets obscured by this layer here. So just a lot of flexibility in how you add your layers to Spotlight so that you can show and or hide certain things as you have multiple layers intersecting each other. And in this case here, you can also see we've got this suspect that's going to go over, so we could also change the position of that as well. So we could go back in, maybe we want to just put that on top since they're going to go off the top, or maybe even to the side, something like this. So a lot of flexibility here. Again, we can adjust where these layers sit, what gets precedent within the video. And then when we're all done, we just simply click process, we select our desired output format, and then it outputs the video, and we can pass it on to law enforcement, or if we are law enforcement, we can pass it on to a news agency to show on the news, to possibly identify a person, or we could use it as a presentation tool for court. We have other examples for different specific purposes for using Spotlight, and some of the examples in terms of highlighting important information, obscuring irrelevant information, and protecting innocence. Thank you.